She was born into a world with no light, no sunrise, no moon, no color, only the texture of her mother's voice and the hum of things unseen. People called her broken, though never to her face. They whispered that her world was too small, that she would never understand beauty. But she heard the wind tracing trees. She felt the warmth of yellow on her skin. She tasted the sadness in blue. They didn't know that silence had shades, that she had seen storms in the way her father sighed, that she had met joy in the shape of laughter. Her name was Liora. It meant light, irony, some would say. But to her, it was a promise. She would sit for hours with her hands on the piano, not playing, just listening, to the space between the notes, to the breath of the wood. Music was the only place that didn't lie. One day, at the age of 17, someone asked her what she wanted to be. She said, "A painter." They laughed. Not cruelly, just awkwardly. How could she paint what she had never seen? But Liora didn't want to paint what others saw. She wanted to paint what they missed, the weight of silence, the echo of prayers no one said out loud, the invisible colors of grief and hope. She found an old canvas in the attic, rough, unused, forgotten, like her. She touched it, and it whispered, not in words, but in a way her chest understood. Her father gave her brushes, not because he believed, but because he couldn't say no to her voice. Her mother mixed the paints, choosing colors based on her daughter's questions. What does sorrow feel like to your eyes? What shade does forgiveness have? They sat for hours describing things no one had names for. Liora painted, not with skill, with ache, with memory, with hunger. The strokes were crooked, the lines confused, but something inside them pulsed. Visitors came, unsure what to expect. They stood in silence. Some wept, some stayed, some left changed. They said her paintings made them feel what they never had words for. Liora never saw any of them, but she listened to their breath. She heard healing in the tremble of their thanks. At night, when everyone was gone, she would sit alone in the room, the smell of paint and wood around her. And she would smile not because she had proven them wrong, but because she had finally spoken in her own language. The wall of eyes one afternoon, a critic visited. He didn't speak right away, just stood there, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Then he said, "It's raw, confusing, it lacks form." Liora tilted her head. She wasn't offended. She had heard sharper things in softer voices. He continued, "You'll never be more than a novelty, blind girl with brushes." She thanked him, not out of politeness, but out of knowing. She knew his voice, the sound of a man afraid to feel. Later, her mother found her with a canvas torn in half. Not in anger, in silence, in quiet surrender. But Ash, a blackbird who had started visiting her windowsill, chirped and pecked at the pieces, refusing the end. Liora laughed for the first time in weeks. The next day, she painted again. Not to impress, not to heal, just to speak. The paintings changed. They weren't softer, but deeper. They held shadows now, not sadness. Truth. The kind of truth you don't want to look at, but can't forget. People kept coming. One woman touched a canvas and whispered, "This is the color I dream in." A boy stood in front of a red and gray piece for an hour, crying. He left a note. "You made me feel my father again." Liora couldn't read the note, but her mother read it to her, voice trembling. The room without walls. One evening, someone knocked. A stranger. A woman with a cane and shaking hands. She didn't speak English well, but she brought a small box. Inside, folded carefully, was a piece of cloth. Blue, soft, old. She said, "This, your painting. It remembered my home." Liora held the cloth. It smelled of time. The woman kissed her hands. left without another word. That night, Liora couldn't sleep. She stood barefoot on the cold floor, hands stretched out, listening to the walls. Not for ghosts, for echoes. She asked, not aloud, but deep inside, "Why me?" Not in complaint, in wonder, in awe. The next morning, she painted one last piece. All white, but textured. Layers and layers of strokes no one could see, only feel. She named it, "The Room Where God Speaks." It didn't sell. It wasn't displayed. It stayed in her room, not hidden, just waiting. People kept asking her to teach. She said no, not because she didn't want to, because some things must remain sacred. She never became famous, but her work lived on hospital walls, in strangers' homes, in the hearts of those who had no language for what hurt. She aged, slowly, quietly, still painting, still blind. But when people asked her what color meant, she would smile and say, "Color is how the soul breathes." And they understood, not with their eyes, but with something much older, much deeper. And the blackbird? It never left. Every morning, it sang, not for her, but because it had heard something no one else had. The sound of a soul painting the invisible.